Welcome to the Savvy Sauce, where we have practical chats for intentional living. I'm your host, Laura Duggar, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode is sponsored by Slumber Sleepwear. These are my absolute favorite pajamas. Check them out at slumbersleepwear.com. I'm so excited to announce our top 10 most downloaded episode from 2025 is a conversation with my local guest, Emily Johnson. She is a fellow homeschool mama who married her high school sweetheart, and now she's the owner of Gracious Healing, which is an online nutritional practice that works with families to get to the root cause of their health issues, all with a holistic view and approach. Emily has so much goodness to share about health for us and our children. Here's our chat. Welcome to the Savvy Sauce, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you today. And I'd love for you just to start off by vision casting the biblical reasons for pursuing a healthy life, both for ourselves and for our family.
Yeah, I feel like this is a question that I have wrestled with a lot, right? Because there's so much depth to this. And so obviously in a short podcast, we're trying to paint the picture. I think the best way I can paint this picture without really going into deep theology is just this idea that when we have a big picture of the destiny that God has for us and our children, we want to steward every part of our lives, including our health, to be able to run after all that he has for us, right? If he came to give us life abundantly, right, that doesn't always look like maybe this Western view of abundance. But when we kind of approach our health in the same way we do our finances and our resources and stewarding them well, I find that that big picture actually helps kind of keep us on this path of right, my kids may love McDonald's, maybe want to go to McDonald's all the time, but the reality is I believe that I know who God created them to be, and I believe that he has this destiny over them. And so if I allow them to steward their bodies poorly in a way that makes them sick and tired, then they're not able to run after that destiny fully. And then, right, there's this limitation. And so to have this idea of abundance, this whole holistic view is that we steward our mind, our hearts, our spirits, our bodies. It's all one. And if we steward that according to God's word, then we just get to run with him in such a way that just brings joy in life. That is so opposite, I think, than what happens when we're sick and tired and depleted.
That's a good word. And I think all of this information, you do such a great job with all of your work, running it through the lens of parenting so we can help our kids. But it's helpful even for me to remember everything that's healthy for our children is also healthy for us as the parents. And so I appreciate that reminder. But I'd love to just go through some various areas and see if you even have quick tips to get us started for ideas. So we'll just begin very basic. Even water and hydration. Can you just lay the groundwork here?
Yeah. So to backtrack a little bit to what you said, because I think it's super important, I firmly believe that in most things, there's obviously a caveat to some things, but in almost everything, you can't give what you don't have. So how do we give our children health and a big picture and asking them to steward something when we ourselves don't have the experience of what that means? And so I think that, right, it's a whole family affair, but often we are the gatekeepers. So as parents, if we are not open and willing to understand health and wellness, then how do we ask our kids to do that, right? And so I feel like that's just kind of, so often it starts with mom, honestly. So kind of running into water, hydration, there are so many pillars, right? You can look at all sorts of different practitioners out there, health, kind of all sides, whether you're looking at kind of Western medicine or you're looking at more traditional like Eastern medicine or you're looking at holistic functional, right? Everybody's going to have the 7, 8 pillars to health. I think that almost everyone would agree within those pillars are going to be different, but almost everyone has hydration as a pillar, right? And why do we need hydration as a pillar? Our bodies are there's so many facets and different mechanisms within the body, but so much of it depends upon hydration. And if the cell has enough water and electricity, right, to operate and continue those processes. I feel like so often when we look at hydration, um, just we just are, and it's not so much just drinking water, right? Some people like, I just am not drinking enough water to stay hydrated. And that is a huge factor. But when we look at hydration and just what happens when the cell doesn't have enough water and you're just, right, your body is depleted of that hydration, you will, right, be more tired. I feel like, again, disease kind of sets in quicker. That cell doesn't have the capacity to do what it's supposed to do. And bowels move slower, right? Your skin is more dry and cracked. Like there's just so many different facets of detox and flushing things out that are dependent upon hydration. But I think that we have to look at one, how much water are we drinking? I think some people, everything in health I have found is truly that Goldilocks approach. Sometimes we want to take something and we want to run with it and be like, well, if a little's good, a lot's better, right? And it's often this approach of like, what is really best for you and your body and your system. So when we look at water, we want to be well hydrated from just a metabolic perspective. But with that, we're looking at how much water are you drinking and what is in your water, right? So if you have somebody who's drinking super contaminated water, it's going to be adding toxins as they're adding water, right? And so we want to look at what kind of water are we drinking. Then we want to say like how much water, right? There's a kind of a general rule of thumb that people jump off of, and they would say half of your body weight in ounces is a good place to start. I say that's true for most people under certain conditions. If you are somebody who is, right, sometimes I will find that people will drink 100 plus ounces of water a day, but then they're drinking just as much coffee and energy drinks along with it. And so you're like, that's a lot of pressure on your kidneys to have to flush out all of that liquid. And then you have somebody who is potentially eating very processed food, right? That processed food. So we think anytime we take what we're going to say is like man food or God food in the way God created it, right? So God created water to be enriched with minerals. Structured water, you find it in nature when water is like running over a brook and like hitting those rocks and kind of moving, that becomes almost electrical within it. And so when you look at how God created the water, and we see that is what's best for our bodies. Now we backtrack and we say, whenever we take something that God created and we kind of make a man version of it, it often requires more nutrients within our bodies to process that. So when you have like processed food that's void of hydration, void of nutrients, it's going to actually require your body to take the reserves that it has to process that thing within the body. So hydration is no different, right? When we're eating really whole good foods that are full of water content, right? Like watermelon, cucumbers, chicken, ground beef, right? If we're not overcooking things, it should hold moisture in those foods. So when we're eating whole foods, we're actually getting hydration, right? When we're drinking herbal teas, we're getting good minerals and hydration. And so I say a lot of people, it's like, okay, yes, do the like half your body weight in ounces for an average person, but also take into account, are you somebody who's sweating a lot and you're just constantly working in an environment where you're really dripping with sweat, or you're an athlete? You're probably going to need more than that. Are you a person who eats really good whole nutrient dense food and you don't eat any processed food and you're not necessarily overly exerting yourself in sweat? You may not need that much hydration, right? So kind of listening to those body cues. I've always heard when you find you're thirsty, it's probably because you're already dehydrated, right? So being on top of it, I feel like so many of us do better in the summer because we're hot and we're thirsty, but being intentional all the time with kind of trying to measure that amount of water, and then taking into account other things. One of the parts of cellular hydration that I feel like is often missed, and this might be going down a rabbit trail, so you can cut me off if it is, but when you have a healthy functioning body, your mitochondria will make ATP. And one of the products of ATP is actually like a fourth phase of water. It's like a gelatinous form of water, which is super, super hydrating. So somebody who is really metabolically functioning well and getting all the nutrients and vitamins they need, the rest, the sunshine, right? They're just living that life and their body is thriving in it. They actually, again, may need less water because their body's producing enough water that they don't necessarily have to be chugging the same amount of water. So I find some people, if we're overexerting our water, we might want to ask the question, why are you so thirsty all the time? Why are you drinking so much water? There might actually be something metabolically imbalanced. Kids are super great. I feel like they're so intuitive that unless they're drinking sodas and juices and energy drinks, if they're just drinking water and eating whole foods, most of the time they're pretty good at knowing when they need water and when they don't.
Because is that rule, I guess, generally recommended as well with the half your body weight in ounces? Is that the same for kids? And you feel like they're just natural at regulating
Yes.
that?
Yeah. And so sometimes you look at a kiddo who's super tired all the time, and you might ask the question, how much water are they drinking? Right. The other thing I find with kids, with kind of this like new Stanley water bottles and stuff for women, it's a little bit different. But I feel like with kids, because we're so like in this mindset of kids get water bottles, right? And you like fill their water bottle up before you send them to school or daycare or whatever, or just for the day. Unless you're drinking out of a glass cup at home all the time, most kids just naturally fill up a water bottle, I find, just nowadays. And so it's easier to track their water, I feel like, for most kids. And so, okay, kind of that general rule of thumb, in general, half your body weight. You know, my son, when my kids were in public school, he used to come home and like none of his water, like his water was hadn't been touched, right? And I'm like, okay, you went 6 hours through the whole day and never took a sip of water, right? Like that's obviously would be a problem. But I think he was so distracted at school, right? That like he wasn't realizing kind of those cues within his body to reach for his water. But yes, it would be the same for kids.
And now a brief message from our sponsor. Ladies, you don't realize how much you've been settling until you feel the difference. That oversized tee or those worn out shorts, if you would be embarrassed to be seen in them, then why do you sleep in them? Slumber sleepwear is what you didn't know that you were missing until the first night you put it on. Softer, elevated, designed to care for your body at the end of the day, not just cover it. And once you slip into it, you can't unfeel it. Which means every night you're not wearing it, you're missing out on the kind of rest your body's been asking for. For the men listening, this is an upgrade she didn't know that she needed, but she won't want to live without. Make sure you shop now at www.slumbersleepwear.com. Thanks for your sponsorship. Okay, well then you also mentioned sunlight. So how does sunlight and just general outdoor time impact our children's health?
Yeah. So there's, again, so many rabbit trails we could probably go down on this. But in general, I always look at the body as what did God create and how close to nature how are we living or how far away are, right? So there's a doctor that is always quoted. He says, you know, the further away from nature that we get, the more disease that we see, right? And so when you look at sunlight and getting your feet on the ground, so from a metabolic perspective, sunshine is super important for our circadian rhythm. It's super important just for cellular health, for energy, right? So when you get that sunlight on your face, that not only gives you vitamin D, if you kind of have the processes of in the body, right, to convert the sunlight to vitamin D, but it is also going to be super helpful for your eyes, because the minute your eyes see sunlight in the morning, people always say, I can't sleep at night. And I'm like, okay, what do you do the first hour of your morning? Because the first hour of our morning actually sets that clock for the rest of our day and actually kind of helps us fall asleep at night. So when you look at sunlight, it just the way that it actually helps your circadian rhythm, it's going to help naturally calm. If you ever go outside and you feel a little bit anxious and then you go outside and you almost just breathe, right? Like, I think there's just this beautiful calming effect that the sun has on most people, right? It just lifts your mood. It just because our bodies are so deprived of sunlight. When you look at again, the cell, it's why red light, things like that, people really enjoy, because you do get some of those light waves within the like your skin absorbs it, and then right, it just kind of helps your adrenals, your cellular function, just in general your body. There was an interesting study years ago that I had come across that were actually talking about chickens and how, right, why do you use chicken lights? Why do farmers use chickens? Because if you don't use a warming light and get sun, like a fake sunlight, right, on the chicken, they'll molt in the winter and they won't lay eggs. But as long as you keep stimulating the sun by getting light on their skin, then they actually keep reproducing eggs and their feathers don't molt. And so they were using that study to say, okay, how does that affect humans, right? And I always feel like God gave us the sun, and right, when we're out in the sun, like, so many parts of the body just process better and more efficiently. Then you mentioned getting your feet on the ground, right? And so when you look at the electromagnetic fields within the earth, they are, again, God made electric magnetic field. When you get your feet on the ground, when you're in nature, when you're out in, there's a grounding effect that happens. So I think this happens in both our physical and our spiritual sense, right? So physically, you actually start getting, in the same way we need water, we also need really good electricity within the body to, again, kind of make all those processes of the body happen. When we are when we're kind of living under false light, we're not getting our feet on the ground, we're not getting out in nature, and where everything is kind of artificial, right? The body just doesn't thrive in the same way that it does out in nature. So getting our kids outside, getting them in the sunlight is not only going to help just them feel better, it's going to help their skin, right? Their energy of the body, all those different things. Then getting their feet on the ground, they actually can start absorbing that electromagnetic field from the earth. It's why astronauts, right, when they go off into space, their body ages really, really, really fast, because they don't have the gravity and they don't have that electrical pull that happens when we're out in nature. There's some fun studies that talk about how when you get like even just like 1 24-hour period of like camping is enough to totally reset your circadian rhythm. Just like one, and then it lasts, right? There's some other studies on the immune system and how when we're in nature for just even 2 to 3 days consistently, right? And so that looks like man-made environment, going in nature for a couple days, and then coming back to man-made environment, and how that just boosts your immune system, for up to several months. Like, it just kind of lingers, right? And so the idea of, if we're always in nature, we're always getting outside, we're always going to get these benefits. Because I work a lot with children with neurodivergent issues, one of the best things, again, we can do for our kids from a brain development perspective is actually letting them get outside and run around and climb on things and jump off things, and right, because that actually helps strengthen parts of the brain as well as just their overall body. For kids who are super nearsighted, getting them outside in the sun and like doing work and stuff outside actually will help strengthen those eye muscles. So there's just so many cool benefits. I think even just when you look at being inside a building, you have walls, right? So your depth perception, your awareness is still kind of closed in. But when you go outside in nature and you're even just in your backyard, right, there are no walls, right? So there's just an expanse, and your mind and your perception, what you hear, what you see, what you smell, everything just gets kind of grounded is honestly the best word. And I think even spiritually, you see that, right? We started gardening years ago, not because I'm particularly good at gardening, but because I had read that like the parables in the Gospels are so much more amplified when your kids understand what it looks to farm. And obviously we live in town. We don't live on land where we can like do the full farming thing, but at least the idea was that our kids would understand what it means for a seed to go in the ground, what it means for it to sprout, what it means, to have to prune the peach trees, what it means to have, to be able to harvest after you've done all of this work, right? And so that even just those things, like there's so much more, I think, spiritual and physical and emotional of just being in nature, right? We slow down, we just appreciate God's beauty in a different way. And then metabolically, we just see all the amazing benefits that it has.
And I'd never heard that before about camping resetting us even for months. If that feels too big for somebody to do
Yeah.
right away, is there any recommended amount of time just as we're getting started, even as it's starting to get colder out, when the weather is tolerable, what amount of time will we maybe start to see benefits of being outdoors?
Yeah. So everyone, unfortunately, right, is a little bit different in kind of because it's going to depend on what you're doing inside too, right? So if you're on a screen 24 hours a day, and then once you go outside, you spend 20 minutes outside, right? I would say most of my clients, I encourage 20 minutes a day outside, even when it's really, really cold, right? Because there's also beautiful benefits of cold therapy. So as you're moving into the winter, sometimes I'm like, that's actually so fun because you get light in the morning, you get your kids outside, they get their energy out, and they're getting cold exposure, which is also super helpful at boosting the immune system, right? It's a hormesis stress. So there's some stresses that are really bad and you kind of want to avoid those stresses, right? But there are other stresses that in short measurements are actually increase the ability of the immune system to kind of modulate it and boost just resiliency in general. And so honestly, even cold I just think with air conditioning, with lighting, with all that stuff, right? We have just kind of lost our ability to be resilient from a biological perspective. So the more in the summer when it's really warm and you're pushing your kids outside, right? And they're kind of getting to like, oh, it's too hot. Or when it's in the middle of winter and you're pushing your kids outside and they're like, it's freezing cold, right? And so it doesn't have to be a lot, but I would say a little bit. And I also find that it's kind of the teenager and adults that have a harder time being outside. Kids will always run outside and play, right? Once you get them out there, I feel like most of the time it's hard to then get them back in. But I would say in general, starting off with just, and I say 20 minutes for kids because I think that's super important and even more, right? So I love the like 100 hours, a year outside, like a lot of that initiative and those books are just so cool because kids love charts and they love being outside. So an hour a day is another kind of helpful benefit. But I would say if you're really struggling, depending on schedule and just your work and sports and all the things, any amount outside is going to be beneficial, right? So grab your coffee, go stand outside, even in the cold, even if it's still dark outside, right? Sip on your coffee for 5 minutes. And then as much as you can do throughout the day to just get outside, park a little farther away from the grocery store. So you get a little bit more time outside, right? Camping in your backyard. If you're like, I don't want to go camp, or my kids used to, put hammocks out and sleep outside. Just that type of stuff. It doesn't have to be like go into the middle of the woods and hibernate. It can be these little chunks of just exposure. Even when we say nature, the studies that I've always come across are like deep in the woods, but we also see the benefit of just um, being outside, even in a rural area, right? Or a super industrial area or a super heavily populated city. Like it is still, you still see a lot of benefits. People in New York who are just going outside on their patio, like you still see health benefits. So I would say make a resolve amount of time and stick with it until that becomes easy. And then you start doing the next thing, right?
I love that. Okay, that's doable to start with a bite size, and some is better than none, and more is better than some. I'm also thinking, as you're talking about cold therapy and grounding, maybe not for kids with cold plunging, but are there any other kind of biohacks? And are grounding mats that we can sleep on, is that helpful for children too, if they're not getting the amount of time barefoot on the ground outdoors as we would like?
Yeah. So one of the things we think about with grounding is again eating whole nutrient dense food that is going to help that mitochondria, right? Those type of foods, the electrical current of the body, that actually I find some kids don't need to kind of ground like on the grounding mats, maybe the way an adult would, because they're just not depleted as much energy, right, as maybe an adult might be. Grounding mats, I feel like, can go either way because some kiddos, adults too, I just think kiddos, you're not as aware of it as maybe an adult might be, that some, even with grounding mats, I have some very sensitive clients who can't do like man-made EMFs, right? So anything electrical that you're plugging into a wall, Wi-Fi, even like batteries sometimes, they're just very sensitive to. And so sometimes those kind of biohacking things don't work super well if it brings in kind of a man-made current. PEMF is one of my favorite. Most kids respond well to that. And it just kind of boosts the cell back up. I don't know if I've had great reviews from people with grounding mats that anyone feels any different. I don't know if it's placebo. I just haven't had personal testimony that it does a whole lot. PEMF, I definitely have had lots of testimony that kids feel more grounded, adults feel better, just overall kind of addresses the whole cellular function. Red light is my next favorite because, again, if you are sensitive to EMF, you can stay away from it and you're still getting it on your skin. So you see some of those health benefits. Red light's probably my favorite because I just think it's so much easier for kids to do. And there's so many different variations out there that can be super helpful. Again, just getting light on the skin can just kind of help boost the overall just cellular process of the body. You said cold plunges. Cold plunges, again, yeah, for adults are great. Kids are just hard to measure. But cold washcloths, right? Cold, even just like a cold face plunge, right? Some kids don't mind that, and that can be super beneficial for them. But most kids, you're like, just go outside in the cold and you start to see the benefits of that. But I have a couple kids just from like a nervous system perspective, they get real amped up and real worked up, right? And obviously for an adult, I'd be like, go cold plunge. For a kid, you're not going to necessarily do that. But we take ice packs, and I just say take ice packs, put them on the face for just a little bit until they're tolerating it. And a lot of times that will bring kind of that nervous system back into balance, just putting ice packs on your face.
By now, I hope you've checked out our updated website, thesavvysauce.com, so that you can have access to all the additional freebies we are offering, including all of our previous articles and all of our previous episodes, which now include transcriptions. You will be equipped to have your own practical chats for intentional living when you read all the recommended questions in the articles, or gain insight from expert guests in past episodes as you read through the transcriptions. Because many people have shared with us that they want to take notes on previous episodes, or maybe their spouse prefers to read our conversations rather than listen to them or watch them now that we're offering video rather than just audio. So we heard all of that, and we now have provided transcripts for all our episodes. Just visit thesavvysauce.com. All of this is conveniently located under the tab Show Notes on our website. Happy reading! This is new to me. Did you say PEMFs or what is that?
Yeah, so it's pulse electromagnetic field therapy. So it's kind of, and there are homemade ones, or like ones you can get for home that are doable. Therasage is my favorite one, just because it's price-wise, it's doable. Most, I've had lots and lots of testimonies of, autistic kiddos that just, they're calm when they're sitting on it. And then there's really great, like high-tech ones that you would find. Pulse centers is my favorite. Like, they're just really expensive. So most of the time you're going to go to a pulse center of some kind, or a chiropractor or something like that that might have one. But the idea is that it is trying to mimic as close to the ground, right? So when you think EMFs in nature, there's a certain frequency that the sun gives off, a certain frequency that the earth gives off. But man-made EMFs tend to be significantly higher and just way, way, way out of range of kind of what these man-made, or God-made ones are. So when you're sitting on a PEMF, it's kind of mimicking that frequency of the earth and the sun. So you get there's different frequencies for different levels. So pain, neurological, kind of resetting your nervous system, sleep, like there's a lot of different frequencies that you might look at if depending on the health concern that you have. But
Okay.
again, if you're sensitive to like man-made EMFs, then sometimes having something plugged in the wall that you're sitting on doesn't really do it for you.
Mhm. Okay, you're making me even think of weighted blankets then as well. But before we go there, while we're on EMFs, are things
Yeah.
like AirPods the worst for us, or what are
So
practices
funny.
to have in place to avoid the most harmful EMFs, and why are they harmful?
Yes, yeah. So again, when we're thinking, the best way I feel like I can describe it without getting super, super sciencey is that it is kind of like these frequencies are coming at us in a way. So when you're outside on the ground, right, your body, it's like this really beautiful like slow hertz that your like body is receiving. When you get into these higher frequencies, it's kind of like microwaves, right? Like it's just this like constant noise that is bombarding your system. So one of the things that you hear a lot in health is, and I know this is again maybe a little bit of rabbit trail, but I think it applies and maybe kind of encompasses lots of conversation here. But when you think about health, we're always saying like, can you stay in a place of rest and digest? Can you stay? Is your nervous system always in this heightened fight or flight stage? Or even worse, so it's called dorsal vagal, when you jump up to this like freeze mode and your body just kind of freezes, right? We're not making good cells. We're not necessarily running from a dragon, right? Or a lion or something. We're not like scared in that way, but we're also not resting and we're not digesting and absorbing either. Because there's this heightened kind of nervous system reaction that's happening. So when you look at, obviously we always think of stress as emotional, right? And it's like, oh, I want to avoid the stress emotionally. But metabolically, we're looking at what externally also is causing stress on my system. And so EMFs, because we don't see them, I think a lot of people don't realize how problematic they are. But it's almost this like, you can't see the wind, but you can feel it, right? It's kind of like that in the sense that you can't necessarily feel the EMFs, but if you were to take certain electrical measurements, you're able to see like that's emitting a ridiculous amount of frequency. And so you think of like just sitting in your living room, super calm, relaxed, right? But if you have all of this bombardment of EMFs kind of at a frequency level hitting your body, then without realizing it, you're like, why does my body always feel like it's stressed out? And so again, from a resilience perspective, how do you fight infection and deal with the actual stressors in your life if you're in a place of always being in this kind of heightened fight or flight stage? So EMFs, man-made EMFs, there's a lot of different ones you can talk about. There's ones, obviously, you have an AC/DC that runs through your walls. That can be problematic. You have Wi-Fi. I would say the top things that I would say for most people, AirPods, I would say is relatively low. It depends on how much you wear them, right? If you're a kiddo who's wearing it 12 hours a day, it's not super great. Some people would say that unless you get like a tubed type EMF specific, earbud or headphone, that every single one, whether it's wired or wireless, is probably not great for you. The younger you are, the more problematic it is because the way your brain is and the way that the protection around your brain is, you're more sensitive the younger you are. So you can look on like a thermogram and you can see of how a kiddo with like a cell phone to their head is going to be like all of a sudden their whole head is like bright red and hot versus an adult who does the same amount of time. It might be a little bit more like orange, but it's not going to be as bright red because you don't have that barrier around your brain quite yet. When you're little, it's still forming versus when you're adult, you have more of a thicker skull. Your brain protection is just different. So I would say top ones that seem like the most problematic are 5G, because again, it's just this like, I just read a study the other day that we had more bees die this last winter in America than we've had, right? Like all like, I don't know, ever recorded, and the question was, you have really high frequencies like 5G that's like disrupting a lot of our animals. And actually, they've shown that it does kill bees, And so when you think of if it's killing off animals and disrupting kind of the natural way that birds and bees and things are able to communicate and locate where they need to go because that EMF is so or that 5G is so disruptive, then what is it doing to our own brains and bodies? So I would say 5G is not great. So if you live by a tower, sometimes you do need to like protect yourself if you can. That looks like different sheets. There's different sheets and options and things that you can go on your wall. There's a ton of like EMF protection in the world. I don't know if that's necessary for most people. Unplugging your Wi-Fi at night, talking on a speakerphone and not having your cell phone up to your head can be some of the easiest ones. I have found that most people, it feels very doable to unplug your Wi-Fi because that can emit a lot of really high EMF frequencies. And then anything that you can do that's just more on speaker and not in your ear is probably better, but I don't think it's terrible if it's short term.
Even going back to that outdoor time, we've talked about clean water, mentioned some clean food, grounding. All of these things are free options so far as well. And even just how much cleaner outdoor air is compared to indoor air. Can you speak to how nature is a natural filtration system for air?
Yeah. Trying to think of where we want to go with that. So I think that when you look at the way that grass and leaves, right? When you're thinking of like fourth grade science and you're like, okay, what photosynthesis, right? All these different things, the way that they give up oxygen and the way that they filter, different pathogens in the air. And when you think of the breeze and just the natural way that things move around outside, you're going to just have that natural, nothing's going to settle as much, right? And when you have your indoor, your windows are all closed, you don't have that natural cross breeze, you don't have that natural movement flowing through. And then, right, you just have nature that's just good at releasing oxygen into the air, and you have trees that just naturally absorb those toxins. And yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's so good. It's just, it's helpful to have those little takeaways. And I'm just thinking, get outside, get outside. Emily and I were having so much fun that we chatted for well over an hour. So we actually divided this episode into 2 parts. And if you want to hear part 2, which is jam-packed full of more practical tips, and I highly recommend it, I'm going to leave an easy link in the show notes so that you can just click on that and access her second episode. One more thing before you go. Have you heard the term gospel before? It simply means good news, and I want to share the best news with you. But it starts with the bad news. Every single one of us were born sinners, but Christ desires to rescue us from our sin, which is something we cannot do for ourselves. This means there's absolutely no chance we can make it to heaven on our own. So for you and for me, it means we deserve death, and we can never pay back the sacrifice we owe to be saved. We need a Savior. But God loved us so much, He made a way for His only Son to willingly die in our place as the perfect substitute. This gives us hope of life forever in right relationship with Him. That is good news. Jesus lived the perfect life we could never live and died in our place for our sin. This was God's plan to make a way to reconcile with us so that God can look at us and see Jesus. We can be covered and justified through the work Jesus finished if we choose to receive what He has done for us. Romans 10:9 says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. So would you pray with me now? Heavenly Father, thank you for sending Jesus to take our place. I pray someone today, right now, is touched and chooses to turn their life over to you. Will you clearly guide them and help them take their next step in faith to declare you as Lord of their life? We trust you to work and change lives now for eternity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, you are declaring Him for me, so me for Him. You get the opportunity to live your life for Him. And at this podcast, we're called the Savvy Sauce for a reason. We want to give you practical tools to implement the knowledge you have learned. So you ready to get started? First, tell someone. Say it out loud. Get a Bible. The first day I made this decision, my parents took me to Barnes & Noble and let me choose my own Bible. I selected the Quest NIV Bible and I love it. You can start by reading the book of John. Also, get connected locally, which just means tell someone who's a part of a church in your community that you made a decision to follow Christ. I'm assuming they will be thrilled to talk with you about further steps, such as going to church and getting connected to other believers to encourage you. We want to celebrate with you too, so feel free to leave a comment for us here if you did make a decision to follow Christ. We also have show notes included where you can read scripture that describes this process. And finally, be encouraged. Luke 15:10 says, "In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." The heavens are praising with you for your decision today. And if you've already received this good news, I pray you have someone to share it with. You are loved, and I look forward to meeting you here next time.